This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea as to the meaning of the word?
What is up?
Yo,
What's up?
the gang's all here.
I asked y'all first, so
Oh,
Oh, well, it's Friday, I guess.
somewhere.
I'm not even happy it's Friday
Why not?
because I have to get on a plane on Sunday and I'm not ready.
You're flying in Sunday?
Yeah, I don't do stops. Okay. Is that bougie? I don't care. I'll fly at weird times.
But it doesn't matter if it's bougie or not.
Well, I will fly at weird times to avoid having to make stops because I hate stopping. It's just like in the car. Like I won't stop in the car either.
That checks out.
There was only one nonstop flight to DC on Monday, and it was not going to get in until like late evening. And we have a thing on Monday.
We have a Podia retreat, which is what we're talking about traveling to in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
At the White House?
Joe Biden was so impressed with our online course platform that
Yeah.
wanted to bring us in, all of us.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
I did order some clothing for the trip. I think it's
To the White House.
Yeah.
See, that's what I need to do.
The clothing I wanted wouldn't get here till Monday. It's kind of a risk. So it was a patriotic Hawaiian shirt. And it was
To the White House.
I can
Top
see it
notch.
so well. I can see it perfectly. It's
But-
in crisp 4K in my imagination right now.
I mean, think Eagles and the whole works.
I will
Waited too
literally
late to
buy this
order
shirt
it.
for you.
I hope they sell one in DC. So surely there's a souvenir shop that has some dope ass Hawaiian shirts.
Yes, in the middle of the country, not near the ocean.
Is Washington DC in the middle of the country?
I meant like middle as in like up and down, not middle left and right.
Yeah, bet.
That, now that you've explained it to me, I'm like, wait. It's still cold over there, right? See, that's where I'm at in this level of trip planning. I don't even know what the weather's going to be like.
It's,
I don't either.
It snowed here today. It was
Oh,
snowing
hell
today.
no. It's like 95 here.
Yeah. It
I
was
don't
like,
own any pants anymore.
yeah, I was like, how is it April and it's snowing? But there's no global warming.
Global
Andrew.
climate change.
Andrew, I'm going to tell you now, it is looking like highs in the 60s.
No, that's cold.
Tuesday it's going to be 77.
Aw.
I'm about to buy pants.
Yeah. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but here we are.
Oh, well. But yeah, it is Friday. I'm excited. What you been doing, Chris?
Well, what have I not been doing? I had the joy of fixing a bug that has been a very minor thing for like 4 years and finally found a solution to it randomly this week. So that was the top of my week. And then I woke up this morning because I deployed it yesterday and woke up this morning and got an email from somebody about that exact bug and was like, hey, my server had this issue. And I was like, are you telling me that it didn't actually work? I was so excited yesterday. And then I got that email and I was like, no. But I started comparing times and I think it happened before I deployed the fix. So I might still be in the clear, but it's been a roller coaster of emotions this week. I feel like just, so satisfying. And then just ripped right from beneath you. Not cool. The rest of the stuff we've been working on, like tons of Stripe tax support and Stripe payment element and addresses. And did you guys realize Shopify has like a JavaScript tool or several packages that are for basically like formatting your addresses for every different country so that you can put last name first in certain countries or like hide the state because that country doesn't have provinces or states, or like rearranging all your fields into the different formats. I knew they were different, but do I want to implement that stuff? No, not really. I wish there was a nice address gem or something that could be dynamic for all that.
I see
I'm like,
Andrew getting triggered.
I'm literally sweating right now. Please stop talking about this. I'm dealing with
Relevant.
addresses in Stripe too. Please, I
Yeah.
don't want to do that.
Yeah, to do that stuff like thoroughly and well is way more work than you ever realize. Amazon, I think, is one that's still a very generic line 1, line 2, state, province, whatever is one field, region, and they just keep it like generic for everything. But if you switch around Stripe or Stripe checkout or like Shopify addresses and change the country and stuff, they all start to jump around and you're like, oh no, I don't want to have to do all this, just to format it. But yeah, there's a lot of those things that I feel like should be a solved problem, but there's like a handful of random libraries you could pick up and try to like implement, but you still got to do it from scratch mostly. And I think that's kind of strange. Why haven't we got a better solution for that?
Because everything is terrible.
Yeah, everything's got to be complicated, doesn't it? So yeah, that stuff's been interesting. We've been trying to figure out how to squeeze in promo codes, but apparently the checkout stuff from Stripe is custom built internally or something because their API, their JavaScript stuff doesn't really quite support the same flow. Like, why does it have to be this way? Please. I want to build these features and move on to actual like business logic that's unique and important to us, not dealing with addresses and basic flow of checkout that like everybody has to do more or less the same way. It just feels like reinventing the wheel, and that stuff kind of drives me mad.
Oh, are you eating, Andrew?
Yeah, he's making me hungry.
What,
I'm thinking about the work I have to do.
what do you
Fuel
eat?
up, man.
A sandwich,
What kind of sandwich?
a BLT with turkey and bacon.
Wouldn't that just be like a turkey sandwich?
Well,
Turkey and bacon sandwich and then the lettuce and tomato or condiments?
no.
Well, it's not.
When I ordered the sandwich, it was labeled BLT.
So does it have tomato or did they replace the T there with turkey?
It has tomato.
So a BLTT.
Yes. Also, follow up, Jason, to our last episode when you debated me with the Grizzlies winning versus the Suns. I went to the Suns game and we won, and it was hype.
I saw. It was a good game.
It was a good game.
Not as good as the one Chris and I went to, where the Grizzlies.
That was
Suns.
a really good game.
Also, let's go there. Do you want to define, as the person who was posterized, do you want to define that to follow up from last week's episode? Casey,
Yes, I will define posterized because I've gotten some questions about this posterization that took place. Jason did not tape me to a poster board and then present me in front of the class. What he did was he dunked on me. There was no backboard. There was no ball. He just physically dunked on me. And that's what posterizing means. Posterizing is when you just dunk on someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so there's not a lot in Ruby world, I feel like, right now to talk about. We can talk about the WebAssembly stuff with that.
Jason, what was the name of your project that was running Ruby in browser?
It's runnerby.io. I was thinking about that when I read that email. It's actually still up and running, but I get a lot of people who talk to me about that. But all I did was build the UI for it and like link it up. My friend Will Glenn was the one who's like, oh yeah, we can just take this, tweak it a little bit here and just make it run in WebAssembly. And I still to this day, I'm like, I don't know how the hell you did that. But yeah, it's still up and running. But this is cool because it's supported by the language. Ruby is like, here's our anointed WebAssembly version.
Yeah, I was going to say, so then I assume that's like you could replace what you had before with all native stuff in Ruby or whatever instead of however it worked before.
Yeah, we exposed some like JavaScript methods because it's I don't remember what I built it in. It's just like a pure React app. It may have been Create React app actually running it. So we exposed some like JS for it. So I would assume we'd have to maybe tweak some of that. It'd be an interesting thing to try. I haven't even touched that project since we did it. So
yeah, it seems really interesting. I don't really know practical use cases for it or whatever, but yeah, it looks neat. WebAssembly is kind of fascinating. I don't know if I'll ever use it for anything, but
there was some talk maybe in a Hacker News thread about that this week. I haven't read much about the release, but supposedly it comes with a way to package up your Ruby code, I think like including dependencies even, So like you could not, it's not necessarily the same as like a Go executable, but in that like you could package it up to run. I don't know the full extent of it, but it's interesting to me.
I did some of that in Python back in the day when I was working on my Carex project for like Linux dependencies. And that was effectively the same thing where you take Python and you put all of the Python scripts with it. And then you like have some executable that basically says, here's this internal Python executable, run these files inside of it. And maybe it's similar to the way that works or whatever. Because an executable can kind of be like a tarball or a zip file, like where you've got multiple things in it. So that's kind of nice to package up and whatever. But yeah, seems pretty cool. I think Bilal sent me the link to it, but Nginx now has like a way to run mruby, and you can script things inside of Nginx. So if you wanted to like register a Let's Encrypt certificate whenever a request comes in for the first time, instead of doing it ahead of time, you could write a Ruby script that runs inside Nginx as a module, which is sweet, instead of writing Lua or whatever. I think Lua is the main one they support. Have you ever written Lua? I don't think I have.
I think I have one time. That or the person I was just mentioning that I did this stuff with, Runner B, showed me Lua because he is a genius and probably had a very good use case to use it for something. But I haven't used it exclusively. Ever.
The one or two luau's.
There it is. In Washington, D.C., in the middle of the country.
Yes. Speaking of mruby, I was digging into that the other day.
mruby.
Yeah, because I was like,
come on. You're gonna
mruby.
You're gonna light my body on fire for you shit and then pull out the mruby.
Yeah, exactly.
I will not stand for this.
Okay. I was playing with mruby the other day because, I mean, I've heard about mruby in the past and I've never really looked into it. And I started to have this idea of, I wasn't even really sure what exactly it did, but I was like, if I could like package like an entire Ruby executable or whatever into this thing, I was building Alfred shortcuts. One thing that people have complained about in the past is like, oh, well, if you're building Alfred shortcuts with Ruby or like PHP or whatever, you have to install them. And I was like, what if I could like somehow package like an mruby executable into it? But I don't even know if you could do that. And then I started reading the instructions and I was confused. And then I was like, anyway, what else am I interested in doing right now?
I've never worked with that at all, but I'm so fascinated by mruby. I think I'm most fascinated by it because last I heard, that's what Matt spends most of his time on, or he did at least back in like 2017, 2018.
Right.
That. My impression of embeddable Ruby is embedding it on hardware, Raspberry Pi, stuff like that. But I could see why you would want to do that for Alfred.
I was just like, if there was a way to like package like this entire thing up so that regardless of what's on your system, it could just run, that would be ideal. I don't even know if that's a thing or not.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the intention of it, right? Because I don't know. I haven't done a whole lot of that stuff for quite some time, like the lower level stuff. Although, speaking of Raspberry Pis, I have one right here where I took the Raspberry Pi and wired up this little, I'll do a screencast on it, but I've got this blue box here is a little dust sensor. So it has like a laser in it and a fan, and it will like reflect the laser off of the dust and then give you a measurement of the PM2.5 and PM5 and PM10 like dust particles. So you can like have an air quality sensor. And that was pretty cool because you basically set up the Raspberry Pi and use the serial interface to read from that device, and you like power it through the Raspberry Pi. And Tenderlove wrote a Ruby gem called UART, which is like the name for serial connections. And I didn't have to like write any code basically, but I could install, it took 20 minutes to compile Ruby on the Raspberry Pi and install this gem, and like, voila, I could read these like dust particles and stuff. And then I lit a candle next to it and blew it out. So there's a bunch of smoke, and like the air quality was really good. And then I put the smoke by it and you could see it shot up real fast to, dangerous levels or whatever. And I was like, this is sweet. So it's fun to like do something like that where like I spend all day building Rails apps and web apps and everything. But this is like hardware stuff, connecting to pins on the Raspberry Pi, and you have to know the baud rate and how to read these like packets that it's sending over and process it all and read streams off a serial interface ever myself. So it's fun to like dig into that stuff.
That's the content I want.
We'll do a screencast on it and hopefully I'll be able to explain it well enough to understand, but it's really like pretty straightforward because the Raspberry Pi just runs Debian Linux. They're like flavor of it for Raspbian. And it's basically like a regular computer, but you can buy those little ESP32 chips, like what Ben Wood showed us with the LED thing. And that you typically run like C code on or something. So that might be a better place. Like if you wanted to run Ruby on there, mruby or something like that might be a good fit. Because for the most part, what I did was just as if you plugged it into your computer, like through USB. So nothing fancy Ruby wise there, but kind of cool.
That's really cool. I've been reading the mruby docs about how you take embedded Ruby and run it.
It's complicated.
And there's several ways. There's a REPL, which isn't necessarily relevant to this, but you can run the mruby program by passing it to an interpreter. It's just an RB file. You can read it with C code. So you could compile it using, I can't even understand this. Bytecode. So mruby provides a Java-like execution style by compiling to an intermediate representation form, then executed. And then bytecode, the C extension. So you could integrate it directly into C code, and that looks about like your options. So there is still, I guess in theory, if you could get that into C, then you could put it pretty much anywhere.
There's a bunch of examples too where you can find how they're doing this, but like, I still don't understand. It's not the Ruby code doesn't look that hard, but like, I mean, some of these mruby files have like C in them, and I'm like, I didn't learn C. I have no intention of learning C, but I guess I need to figure out if what I'm trying to do can actually be done with it and if it's the right tool. So maybe I'll have to keep digging into that.
We recorded an episode a long time ago with Terence Lee, and we talked about mruby quite a bit. It's been a couple of years though, and I probably haven't considered mruby since then.
Yeah, I forgot we did that. That's been a long time. Been a lot of podcasts since then.
This is 175. How wild is that?
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, we're getting close to like 450 episodes on Go Rails, which is like mind blowing.
I was unsure where you were going with that. And I was like, Chris, we're nowhere near 450 episodes. There's a big gap between the two.
Well, we just got to be publishing twice a week to catch up now. Do you guys know what else is on the roadmap for Ruby 3.2? I remember, like a lot of talk about fibers and guilds and whatever around recent Ruby 3 stuff, but I didn't know where most of this stuff stands, and I haven't paid close attention to any of the conversations about it. So I was kind of curious, like, what's new there?
All I know is that whoever is writing these release docs is using Obsidian or something like it, because they left a bunch of like backlinks in the release notes that don't actually evaluate to anything because they only mean something in the context of where that backlink exists.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that they're bundling even less third-party sources. So like that's going to be something people have to probably make changes for if they're going to upgrade.
Yeah, like the libyaml and libffi stuff has been removed or whatever. Libyaml source has been removed from Psych. You may need to install libyaml dev on Ubuntu Debian. There's a few other little hash shift now always returns nil if the hash is empty. Some procs and refinement set, string and struct changes, but all pretty minor stuff. Wonder what the like big plans are for the rest of Ruby 3.2, because that'll come out December, right?
Right. I'm looking at some of the commits. Like there's some IRB now has autocomplete, You can use tab or shift tab to move up and down.
Cool.
That's kind of interesting.
Next year is going to be Ruby will be 30 years old.
Jeez.
First developed by Mats in 1993. That's crazy.
I was dead then.
We had this conversation not that long ago.
That's why I said it.
We haven't talked about this in Vegas.
And we didn't come up with a solution. Yeah, it's some interesting stuff here. I was looking at the other notable changes, like some changes to module, some string stuff, structs. Although now that I know that structs are so slow, I haven't been using them, which is just sad to me because I like structs.
I think structs are fine, but open structs are the slow one, I think.
Okay. Now, I guess the WASM stuff is the big one. But I don't even know what I would use WASM for.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll see more YJIT changes and things like that throughout the year. They still got quite a few months for things to ship, but it's about 8.5 months away or something.
Well, I know they're rewriting in Rust.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be really interesting.
That would be kind of fun to like follow along.
Yeah, it'd be really cool.
And I can read Rust and see.
It'd be nice to have somebody kind of doing a constant update of just here's all the activity of the Ruby language, what's going on in the main branch and stuff. I know that is often kind of monitored by people in the Rails repo, but I don't think we kind of have the same flow of updates on Ruby itself. So that'd be kind of neat.
I guess it's kind of
keep
hard
an eye on that
because it would be easy to do something like that because every GitHub repo has an RSS and the Ruby site, like the news channel has an RSS as well. But it's just like when you read the commits, it's like, how helpful even would this be? Like, because I know I follow this woman named Eleanor and she makes a newsletter for all the changes that have happened in Obsidian each week. But I'm looking at some of these commits and I'm like, what is helpful and what is not? Raise proper exception when month argument is not name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where someone doing a curation would be nice. So it's like they can interpret all this stuff for you, just tell you what you should care about or not. Would be nice.
It looks like they also removed a bunch of default gems.
Oh, yeah?
It looks also like typeprof is now, the following bundled gems are updated. The following default gems are now bundled gems. Okay, so net FTP, net IMAP, net POP, net SMTP, matrix prime debug are now default gems. The following bundled gems are updated. RBS, typeprof, RexML, test unit, rake, power assert, and mini test.
Because that was what bit a bunch of people write with Rails and net SMTP and whatever. So they had to like add that as an explicit dependency or something in Rails because it was just like shipped with Ruby. So you didn't have to worry about installing it or whatever before. But yeah, that's probably an interesting one to like manage because it's probably easier to ship updates as long as it's not included in Ruby, then just push them as Ruby gems and it can be there anytime.
Right.
Rather than waiting for the once a year release for Ruby or whatever.
Yeah. Wasn't that changed though in like 3.1?
Yeah, I think so.
Which like for me, I'm like, that's a breaking change. Is it not?
Yeah. In theory, it wouldn't have been if your dependencies were set right on the other things.
But if you don't, like things that
it
work
is sort
then
of
will not work now.
It is sort of one of those where it could be a breaking change, but also could be like you can assume that hopefully the dependencies would have been listed correctly on the gems. So in theory, it wouldn't have been a breaking change, but it ended up being one. I had a few things like that in a few gems recently where it was like, assuming that maybe a couple people are going to be using this in a certain way, it's not a breaking change for anybody else, but maybe like 5 users who might be doing something really advanced.
Right.
And it's just kind of like, do we go with the Chrome versioning and just have our major version is 197 and just release major versions all the time? I don't know. So I think we ended up like doing a minor version for a couple of those things. And then a few other things were kind of like, okay, these are definitely breaking. So we'll do a major version for that. But it can be tough to manage that because it's never really clear and you don't know how people are using stuff. So you might not even know that shipping this change is going to be a breaking change.
Right.
It's kind of hard.
I mean, if it's public API and it breaks, if someone's using it in a way that you have no idea about, or like somehow they're like, if they're actually not using the public methods, then you can't protect against that.
Hi, my name is Andrew Mason, and I'd like to tell you about Honeybadger. Whether US East 1 is down or you forget to add a configuration file, everyone has an outage from time to time. When your next outage occurs, transparency is critical. The difference between a minor annoyance that people soon forget and a fiasco that creates sustained resentment is how you communicate. That's why you need Honeybadger. Honeybadger is a crucial component of your incident response plan with their uptime monitoring service that now has an exciting new feature, public status pages. Create a new status page with custom domains, branding, and more. Don't let Twitter be the only way your users can find out if your app's down. Sign up for Honeybadger to improve your incident response with a shiny new status page that you'll be proud to show users. Visit honeybadger.io and start giving your users a better experience today. Let them know that Remote Ruby, and specifically Andrew Mason, sent you.
I was having a conversation about this with Drew Bragg the other day because I offered to give him a hand with automatic releases on his Ruby gem that he was making for redacting data off Postgres when you're like dumping data. And that conversation came up because I was like, well, in order for this to work really well, you need to be using semantic commit messages, which we can talk about in a second. But he was like, well, how does it know what version to like bump it to? Because basically the way this action works, it's called release please, is that every time you make a change to main, if there's no open release PR, it will create one, which will bump your version and it will update all your change logs. And as you merge into main, it will continue updating that PR until you're ready to release. And then when you're ready to release, you can just hit merge. And I have it set up so that it will actually cut the release on GitHub, add the changelog stuff, tag it, and then it will release it on Ruby gems as well. And the way it knows what version to bump it to is based on your commit messages. So the primary three prefixes, conventional commits is like a standard for basically prescribing this format to your commit messages. And because anything that's in a specific format can be like parsed basically. So if you're using this format, it opens the door for like a lot of tools for you to be able to use to like really help out your workflows and stuff. And I, number one, never want to update the changelog. And number two, I never remember how to release gems that I go back to or pick up from someone else. So we were installing this and I was like, so here's the deal. If you prefix it with feature, the PR that it will create is going to be a minor release. And I was like, and if you're prefixing your commits with fix, it will make a patch release. And I was like, but if you add like a bang at the end of it, that's a breaking change and it will do a point upgrade. And he was like, well, I feel like this is almost kind of forcing you into like these specific increments of release. And I'm like, yeah, but these are the way you should be doing it, right? You make a breaking change, you bump the point release. You add a feature, you make a minor release. You fix some bugs, you add patches. And it forces you to like adhere to semvert and without you even having to really think about it. And I love that. Now I know that my things are semvered correctly and the change logs are incredibly detailed and I don't have to make them. Whenever I want to merge a gem, I just hit a button. I can do it from my phone. It's easy. I love it.
That assumes you write good messages, right?
Yes, it does assume you write good commit messages. But what this action kind of encourages, or not, it doesn't force you at all because you don't have to add the prefixes, but it basically just won't see that as something that it needs to like generate a release for. But it kind of makes you get a lot better at writing good commit messages. And like, I always squash merge. I don't want to get into that debate, but if you think squash merging is wrong, you're wrong. That's what I have to say about it. See me on Twitter for an argument. And Drew was like, well, what if I don't squash merge? And I was like, well, you should still be using these commit messages as you're building it, even if it is just a merge. I was like, and what it kind of forces you to do, like every time you're writing a commit message, it's not just like fix test, bang. You actually have to think, or like, oh, I need to prefix it with this. What is this PR actually doing? Or what is this commit actually doing? What is it changing? And to write a more detailed commit message. And then you can also add like linters and stuff if you want to actually lint to make sure that your commit message has a prefix and it's a certain length and like this and that. So you can crack open out of your Git log if you have a specific format that you're using for all your commit messages.
I like that because it's mostly, I guess, practical when you're building gems or libraries or something that more matters with your versioning. Because like you wouldn't need that on your own code in Podia or whatever necessarily. Maybe you do if you've got like several repositories that depend on each other and different versions there. But yeah, I do like that because when you are building libraries, you pretty much have to constantly be thinking about the entire time, what is this going to affect? Every single change that you make. And that's really like Raphael's job on the Rails core team, like going through every PR and reviewing these things and making sure that it's not going to break stuff. And he's got such good knowledge of all of that. You may make a PR and be like, hey, we're going to improve this thing. And someone there will be able to tell you like, yes, but no, because this is also going to break these things or affect it. And you may not have known. And I love having that kind of as you go, add those things to the changelog because guess what? It is hard to like keep your changelog up to date or whatever. Like I'll pretty much at this point, like every PR that's made, just make sure there's a changelog entry with it if I'm not using this process, which I'm not yet, but I probably makes a lot of sense to kind of switch to that. What do you think about getting PRs on an open source project? Are you going to force everybody to adhere to that? Because they probably won't. And then we have to go have them rewrite their commits. Yeah. So as long as the top commit there is fine.
Well, then it's going to be whatever. It's basing it on whatever gets merged to the branch you're pointing towards. So if I'm saying anytime something is merged to main, then check to see if it has a prefix. And if it does, either update accordingly the changelog and the pending release. So for open source project, I literally, every time I make a new repo, the very first thing is I disable every other form of merging except for squash merge. And for an open source thing, that would be even better. So that way they don't have to adhere to it. But whenever you're merging it into your code base, you can take whatever information is in those like commit messages that they made that you think maybe is like context that you want to keep, add that to your main commit message and like write a better commit message for the whole thing. The other thing you can do is you can update the body of the commit messages and with certain things that release please has in their documentation, and it will do things accordingly. Like I can add in the body of a commit message, not in the title, like I add release as version 2 and it will change that. Or I could like change what it will appear in the changelog in the body of the commit message as well. So if you didn't want to squash merge, you could change their commit messages. But the other thing is like, at the end of the day, like you're going to be the one hitting merge. So like you can control the merge commit name if you're not squashing. And the things that they've added just won't get added to your changelog. What their commit messages, if they're not prefixed correctly, just won't get added to the changelog. And whatever the main commit message is the only one that will do that with that prefix. Basically, it will still work if you're not prefixing things. It just won't do all of the things that it can do or that give you like the real power.
Yeah, those are just kind of ignored ones because it doesn't know what to do with them or whatever. Makes sense. It's kind of cool. I was poking in the repo and it'll do a replace in your version.rb file of the version string automatically through a little TypeScript code for it. And then I guess it just runs your typical rake release or something for that.
Yep. I linked the PR. It'll be in the show notes of the commit that I made for Drew's gem. And I use these on a lot of my gems, or at least any that I've updated in the last year. I use semantic commit or conventional commit messages everywhere, regardless. The only place I don't do it really is at Podia because we don't do that. But the one thing when you were talking about earlier, the other nice thing about for a big project, like if we were to adopt this at Podia, one really nice thing about having the commits prefix like this is that it makes scanning the Git log so much faster. Because I'm like, okay, something broke here and I can look at the Git log and see, well, this is a fixing this, or this was a fix, this is a fix, this is a fix. This is a feature for this thing. And it suddenly it adds more context to like your Git log.
Yeah, instead of the 1,000 work in progress commits.
Yes. Well, that's just another reason not.
That's why you squash merge.
Yeah, that's why you squash merge.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the history in Git is a tricky thing to get right sometimes. And I feel like having that context right there in rather than having to read every single message in its entirety and like try to interpret, was this a fix or was this a feature or why did we do this? You have to read the whole thing and sometimes dig into the code and like actually look at it. Whereas if you prefix things, then it's going to be easy to scan. And I think that is hugely valuable.
Right.
So,
the other thing,
I like it.
This is like an experience thing. Like this will either happen or not. It forces you to make smaller, much more concise commits if you're not squash merging, because then you want your Git log to be correct, right? Well, in this commit, I added this feature, and in this commit, I fixed this thing. And in this one doesn't change anything. It's just a chore or it's just a deploy task, or I'm changing the docs. There's prefixes for all of that. If you want, the only ones that Release Please actually cares about are feature, fix, and chore, or kind of the three generic ones. But you can add more and then have an even more detailed changelog. So like one use case of this that I do is I'll be on my phone, like a security update will get issued by Dependabot. So the test pass, I hit merge from my phone, and then it builds the release, and I can just merge the release PR, and then it's released to Ruby Gems and it's done. I don't have to do anything else.
Do you have to take like an API key and put it in GitHub secrets so that you can do the release to
for Ruby Gems? Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward, I assume, to grab.
Yeah. The one thing with that is like there's a setting now in Ruby Gems. They changed it, which is really nice. And it's basically like you can't do 2FA on the command line automatically. So what you can do, you need to make this change in Ruby Gems if you have 2FA on, which you should, to say only require 2FA over the UI, not over the command line.
Because that would not be something you could drop into CI or actions or whatever to do. So that makes perfect sense. And didn't they make some change recently to kind of like require 2FA or whatever for Ruby Gems recently? I vaguely remember something.
That sounds very familiar. I think that's also when they changed this setting that like only require on the UI.
Yeah.
That would make sense that they did both of them. Because I think that was like the main thing was like before, if you wanted to release over the command line automatically like this, you had to turn 2FA off everywhere. And now you can have it on the UI, which is where I want it. Ideally, I would have it elsewhere, but like, and I could use the 1Password CLI locally to like dig out that OTP code or whatever it's called. But, you know, in CI, you don't really have that option. So,
yeah, that's pretty awesome. I know that you can look through some of the like, I don't know, JS bundling Rails or whatever that have some like bin release files that kind of do the same thing, minus all of the conventional commit stuff. It's kind of an automated release script or whatever. Just for Rails, if you're going to release Rails like Raphael does, he's got Rails and active record and active support and a ton of gems and some NPM packages to release. That is an awful complicated release process, which is a good one for some automation because you're going to make mistakes otherwise. So
yeah. And there's a file, I think it's at the root of the Rails repo that does that. And the way I stumbled on Release Please is trying to recreate that for like a few gems and for Seamless Reflex or whatever. Because we were like, we want a changelog. Nate and I are not interested in writing the changelog by hand. And I had already been pushing conventional commits at CodeFund at the time. So, I mean, we had a discussion on this in the Ruby Blend, shout out RIP, about this a long time ago. But obviously, like this will require, if you want it to do all the things it can do, it requires a change in behavior, which is something most people aren't interested in. But for me, I'm like, the trade-off is absolutely worth it to like be able to release a gem no matter what. I don't have to like pull it down. Like I can merge someone else's issue commit and release it right from my phone. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to go to a project and remember, wait, how do I release this again? You know, all this other stuff. And it makes the changelog super nice and it adds the releases and I just don't have to do anything. And I don't have to remember to push with tags and like all that other crap. So for me, once you set it up, I've also found like I've never had to touch it again on all my projects. It just runs. So this is the way for me, just to like, it drops so much like stuff that I have to keep in my brain out of my brain. I can basically copy the config to every single project and it just works.
It's nice because like you were saying, like if you're on your phone, you have to bust out your laptop. You could merge the PR normally but then you'd have to get your laptop out and make a release. And this is also goes into maintaining things for the long term. Like you can pull another maintainer into your repo and they'll have the ability to then make releases as well. And you don't even have to be there. They don't have to know how the release process goes. None of that. You just add them to the repo as a maintainer and voila, they can make releases. Yep. And that is a nice thing to do, especially as we've seen like the last few years. I feel like so many gems and other things have been kind of dropped off with maintainers and things, and it wouldn't be too bad. You know, you can give people access to the repo, but then you got to go log into Ruby gems and add them to that as an owner too. And it is complicated. So if you could just say, hey, here's repo access, you're good to go. That is going to make it easier to maintain things long term.
Yeah. I mean, I figure even more for you, like with Colin, you don't have to add Colin to an owner of all your gems. I mean, he could just hit a PR.
Right. So. It's super nice. I'm going to have to check it out because I think that would be very, very useful. I assume installing this is pretty easy to do with it's just one action. Sweet.
You can literally just copy it. I linked the PR that I made for Drew's in there. You should literally be able to copy it and just update the relevant information. Like you need to point it to your version file. You need to specify the package name. I have it set so it won't push it to Ruby gems if the tests fail. And like the test should always be running, right? But I have that in as like a final destination, like just in case, don't release it with failing tests. But you could do other things in there too. Like it has some if conditions in there to basically say only run these if a release is created. And so that would be meaning you merge the PR and it creates the release in GitHub. And then this action will run again with the commands that you want to do after it's been published. And you can even add more stuff in here to like post a tweet to Ruby gems. Like this gem has been updated. Here's the change log. But you could publish it to like an RSS feed or send a Slack message or whatever. It just opens the door for so much more automation. And it's just one simple action. I think it's a pretty simple action file. The majority of the code in here is for releasing it to Ruby gems. So
I'll have to try it out and see how it goes. Cause I could definitely see like pay and notice and all the other gems that I'm working on. It just seems like a natural thing to have. It feels like a feature that GitHub or something should just be built in for that kind of functionality. Maybe it's not the best thing because it has to be unique to every single thing, but it would be kind of neat. And I guess they kind of do sort of have that with the release generator.
That's new.
It's not quite as integrated nicely like this is. Because you won't end up with a changelog file at the end of it.
Right. And well, GitHub now can like generate a changelog, but I don't even know what it's basing that off of or anything. Yeah, I just don't know. Because like if you look at any of my release notes, I have one on my website because you can actually use it for anything. It doesn't have to be Ruby. You can use it for Node. You can use it for et cetera, et cetera. So like if you had a Ruby gem that had Node package with it, like this would be a great way to manage both of them as well. But if you take a look at my like changelog, it's split into like, features, bug fixes, breaking changes, performance improvements, all sorts of stuff, just depending on whatever the prefix is.
Nice. Well, anything else you guys want to chat about this week?
I got to do my taxes.
Jesus, you have like...
I know.
All right.
Doing it today or tomorrow.
Just filing your extension. You just automatically file an extension so you got extra time every year.
Well, you could automate that with conventional tax returns. And what you do is you prefix it with extension or ready.
There's going to be somebody who's going to heavily lobby against that. That way you have to do it.
TurboTax. TurboTax is going to lobby against it.
Mm-hmm.
TurboTax is shady because they have a free product. And like they don't advertise it at all. And everything online points to the paid product, but it is free. You just have to go like extremely out of your way to be able to find it. That's just, I'm not angry.
It's just so they can claim they have that.
Yeah. Well, it's just deceptive to people who like can't just drop $50 for no reason. Like when they think it's going to be free, like it's shady. It's wrong.
The other thing is then they're like, oh, you don't have to pay today. We'll just take it out of your refund, but it'll cost an extra $40 for us to do that or whatever.
We got to make life harder, right? So
Absolutely.
We can make a few extra bucks.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
What a note to end it on.